Well, what is up, Mission? How we doing? Good to see you. My name is Mike Hickerson. So, man, can we, I'm just privileged and honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. Can we just say a huge welcome to a couple different groups? So just a huge welcome to online. Don't say anything yet. A huge welcome to our group that's online and attending. And then a huge welcome to our Mission Oxnard family. Can we just say hello to them? So hello, welcome. So cool to be a part of all that God is doing. Love the party on Friday night, Mission Oxnard. So cool. Again, my name is Mike Hickerson. Honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. We exist to help people find and follow Jesus. That's what we're caught up in. That's what we're about. We're trying not to overcomplicate that because that's complicated enough to surrender our lives to Jesus, let him be the Lord and leader of our life, and believe that God sent his son Jesus into the mess to rescue and save us, and that we can be made new from the inside out, not based on our effort, but based on what God has made a way for us to be. And we have the right to become much loved sons and daughters of his. Man, that's great news. And that's good news for all of us, as we're all moral failures in the room. We actually believe that there are no perfect people. So if you're on the chat or in the lobby or on the patio or in Oxnard, you're going to get used to this. If you're new, it's okay. This is going to be a little offensive, but just go with me here for a second. Just turn to the people that you came with or invited you and just say, hey, you're not perfect. Just let them know. You've always wanted to tell them, so now just tell them that you're not perfect. And they're going to get offended, or they're going to be like, how did you know? You know, all this kind of stuff. And then they're going to be like, well, you're not perfect either. You know, instead of fights will break out all over. I'm just kidding. Let's not let fights break out. That'd be terrible. It's fun to do. We can kind of get it when we're a part of a church like that. Okay, that's right. We're going to all start on the same page. It's terrible to do later when we're in conflict. It's terrible to do later when there's stuff going on. We don't know what decisions to make, to remind each other how unperfect the other is. But it's great to do when we're learning to be the church together, God's people that he's rescued and saved, because none of us on our own can make our way back to God. We're all starting from the same ground, that we have rebelled against a really loving God. So none of us are perfect. But God, in his kindness and grace, sent his son Jesus into the mess of us and said, I can make a way for you to be made right. Man, so there are no perfect people, but there's a really perfect God. And that one fact, historical fact, means there's hope for every single one of us. And that's what we cling to. That's what we go after together. Man, no matter where you're walking in today, or where you're viewing from online, or wherever you're at in life, man, we just call a truce for an hour on a Sunday to say, man, if God is who he says he is, and he sent his son Jesus into the mess, that has some big ramifications for our life, and that is great news. So let's call a truce. Because I know that there's a lot of cynics and questions and skeptics and, people that are deconstructing all the things. I understand all of that, actually. I didn't grow up in church, so I understand it maybe more than you would even think. But I just want to call it truth, because if that's true, then it has some big ramifications for our life and what God would want to do for our life. And it's a journey worth going on. Doubt is not an obstacle to faith. It can be a catalyst to faith if we're honest with it. And so God is a big boy God that can handle all the doubts and all the cynicism and all the skepticism. He's like, if you ask him a question, he's not up there going, man, I can't believe that they figured out the one stumper for me. I've been trying to hide this throughout all eternity so they wouldn't ask me this one, and they got me. And you're the only human of all time that has ever asked me that question, and I was like trying to hide it from you. That's not the way it works. That God is a big boy God that holds up to all of our questions and all of our cynicism and all of our doubt, and he's not angry about it. He actually moves towards us in it. We've been in this series called Late Night, where we've had some conversations about conversations about interactions that Jesus has had late at night that have been pretty pivotal in the Bible. So we started off where we said that where Jesus calms the storm, we said that he calms the storms in us before he calms the storms in our circumstances. And that's hard for us sometimes. Then we talked about where Jesus walks on water, and then Peter sets the all-time human walking on water record, and we shame him for it. And then we talk about Nicodemus, who was a follower of Jesus that came at night, and because he was just had some questions that he wanted to ask Jesus, because questions in Jesus are okay, even in the middle of our dark night. And we talked about last week how there was this last week of Jesus' life that was called the Passion Week, about what he was getting ready to go through and suffer. And we know it on this side of history, but they had just had the Last Supper. They didn't know they were having the Last Supper when they're in the middle of it. And then they go sing a song, and they're in the garden, and Jesus is praying these prayers like, God, yet take this cup from me, yet not if I will, yet your will be done. Whatever, like if it's possible, take this from me, yet not my will, your be done. Our salvation, our story goes right in the midst of that balance. It's a big deal for us, that garden prayer. And today we're going to talk about Peter's denial. Next week, we're going to talk about the death and burial of Jesus and how we call it Good Friday is what that represents. And it doesn't seem like it's good when you're in the middle of the story, but it seems great when you're on this side of the story for us. And then we are going to celebrate like crazy the empty tomb and Easter Sunday and lives being transformed. And man, if you're on the fence and trying to figure out if God is who he says he is and you want to be a follower of Jesus, man, Easter Sunday is a great Sunday to kind of go public with your faith. It's not, you don't go get baptized when you're like, I've got it all figured out. Thank you, God, for helping me figure it out. You actually get baptized when you're like, I am powerless on my own to rescue myself. God, I need you and I don't understand all of it yet, but my desire is to publicly profess with my mouth that I want to be under your authority and accept your son's price for my forgiveness and my rebellion. That's what it is. It's the beginning of a new life, not the end of a figured out life. And so that's where we're at. And so as we're going to talk about Peter's denial today, I thought it was just helpful and more even than to say like there are no perfect people. I thought maybe we would just prove it a little bit. So I'm going to take a little survey. Don't raise your hand to any of these because you're going to feel real embarrassed if you do. So I'm just trying to give you a full, if you're not listening and you raise your hand later, I'm sorry, but you're still welcome here. But just think through if this is you or not. Wait to the end. Again, I'm trying to help you. All right, so if you have ever flunked a class or bombed a test, see, there we go. So if you've ever got cut from a team, really messed up an audition, got rejected for a date, zoned out during a job interview, got fired for a little goof up, a medium mishap, or a huge mistake. Things didn't go the way you dreamed. You lost your cool with the 3-year-old. Allegedly. If you've ever experienced a moral, social, athletic, academic, relational, financial, marital, or vocational failure of any kind, could you raise your hand if you can answer yes to any of those? What a room full of losers. And though if you didn't raise your hand, you're a liar, so throw your hand up. What's wrong with you? We are all a room full of failures. No matter how we try to present and no matter how we try to represent, no matter how we try to put our Instagram view of our life forward, there are no perfect people, and we have all experienced failure in all kinds of ways. Whether it be this way that we do like this big, massive public failure or this internal private failure that we've navigated. No matter how good we've looked, we all experience failure because there are no perfect people. And so when we go to admit like there are no perfect people, that means that I'm imperfect. That means that I'm in need of some gap of rescue because I've messed up in my life. If we are unable to admit that we've messed up in our life, then we are set up for a gargantuan failure of epic proportions because that's pride, and God opposes the proud. Not just doesn't like it and is like, you need to do better. He is against us when we are proud. And so if we can't admit that we have failure, then that's pride in us, and God opposes us, and he will help humble us. He would rather us humble ourselves before the fall so that we can be made right and restored. That unsinkable us that we have, that we can't admit failure. So how do you get a fresh start and a clean slate? Because the Bible is helpful for me when I read it. It's not like all up and to the right people and all up and to the right stories of faith and all up and to the right. You accept Jesus and, you have perfect teeth and perfect hair and your income triples by, it just doesn't work that way biblically. It doesn't work that way in our life either. Actually, the Bible's full of failures that found hope. The Bible is full of strong people that had moments of weakness. It's full of courageous people who wilted under pressure. The Bible is full of faithful people who are at times less than faithful. People who were wrecked relationships, they wrecked families, and they wrecked friendships. People that thought they were washed up, had gone too far, and never thought that they would recover from their failure of epic proportions, whether publicly or privately. And the guy we're going to talk about is one of those today. His name is Peter. And he was like one of Jesus's boys, one of Jesus's best friends, like close inner circle type of dude. And he was like not prim and proper, which gives me hope, right? He was like strong and big and rough hands. He's a professional fisherman and rugged and ripped and probably had some skull in his mouth at all times, just like, Grizzly Adams. That's in my mind. That's Peter, with the country accent and a beat up pickup truck and ready, you say the wrong word and he's ready to go, throw hands in that moment. Kind of like me. That's how I picture Peter to be like. I'm kidding. But he was impulsive. When I read his journey and his story with Jesus, he was impulsive and strong-willed and loud and opinionated. He was a good guy, a good heart. He was a rock. He was committed. He was a loyal friend. And he failed on epic proportions. And we get to read about it all throughout history. His worst days for all of us to learn from. But it wasn't the end of his story. So I'm going to walk through 3 scenes from Peter's life that help us know what to do as failures in the room. When we fail, what do we do? Because we are going to fail, or we have failed. So what does God do to the failures in the room to help us be made right and restored back to him? So there's going to be a few narratives or a few stories of historical stories of Peter's life that we'll walk through on the screen. If you have your app, it'll be on there as well. On your phone, we'll kind of go a little quick. You can take notes, but we'll jump in together. So Peter is this guy that had big talk when it was easy. You know those guys? We don't want to laugh because that's us. It's like we go Top Gun quote, it's like our ego's writing checks that our body can't cash. Like we have this big talk when life is easy. Let me take you back to the upper room. So let me set the scene of what's going on. We've got the Last Supper happening. So Passover would have been this huge Jewish festival in Jerusalem. And there's hundreds of thousands to millions of people that are descending on Jerusalem. It's occupied by Rome. They're a little nervous because Passover was celebrating the fact when God's people, the Jewish people, were rescued from an oppressive regime in Egypt. So they always, every year, would celebrate the fact that God had rescued them. Now Rome is occupying the people of Jerusalem and the people of Israel. And so they're a little nervous about all these people being together because they're worried that somebody's going to try to overthrow them. So tensions are high. Jesus at the height of his popularity. He has an amazing week. We talked a little bit last week. They come into this upper room where they're celebrating this Passover meal. And in this Passover meal, one of the inner circle of Jesus has already agreed to betray him. So events are already set in motion. This is where when we take communion, this is the upper room where it all starts. He's like, take and eat, this is my body broken for you. And they're like, what is Jesus talking about? Take and drink, this is my blood poured out for you. When you do this for the forgiveness of sins, when you do this, remember me. They're like, Jesus, you're right here. Why are we remembering you? What is going on? Like upper room stuff. This is where the feet are washed. This is where the hymn is sung. This is like where the events are set in motion that's getting ready to happen in the next couple of days that are crazy. And they sing this song and then they move into the garden. But what happens up in the upper room is this big talk. Matthew 26 verses 31 35 says this. Then Jesus told them, this very night, you will all fall away on account of me, for it is written. This is like Old Testament verse, far left of your Bible. I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. Goes on. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. So I make so much fun of the early disciples and followers of Jesus, the men and women that were there in the early days. Because I'm like, Jesus didn't hide what was coming. They just couldn't see it in plain sight. Like he was always telling stories. He was always talking about when the Son of Man is being lifted up. This is the reason that I came, to pay the price. And they had all kinds of other expectations on him. He's like, but after I've risen, I'm getting ready to die. Tonight you're going to be scattered. It's getting ready to get crazy. I'm going to rise again. After that, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. He even told them where to be and why and when. You'll watch them. They don't know what to do. They're like, but he's just all right here. Anyway, I feel like Jesus was a parent, in this moment. Like I have laid it out. We've talked for years about how this was going to go and where you're going to be when I get there. So when this happens, we'll show up here, right? Okay, and they still can't figure it out. That gives me hope. Peter replied, like big talk right here. Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. Big talk. Jesus kindly, not mad. Truly I tell you, Jesus answered, this very night, Peter, For the rooster crows, meaning morning, but also there's 3 times. You will disown me 3 times. I know you have big talk, dude. But you don't understand what's headed your way. And I know. That's why when we talked last week, what happens in the garden when he's praying for his crew to not fall into temptation, because he knows they're getting ready to get scattered. But Peter declared, that's why I love him, even I have to die with you. I will never disown you. And all the other disciples said the same, but Peter gets on the hook for the public failure. He's like, one of those, maybe you're one of those where you're the bold one that says all the stuff, and then everyone takes credit for the victories, but when it's the failure, everyone steps back because you were the one that spoke first. That's what's going on right here. Because Peter's ego is writing checks that his body and his faith can't cash. And Jesus isn't mad at it. He just knows what's coming. Like, you been there? Big, bold statements of faith around Jesus and what he's called you to and what you want to do, but not able to back it up when it gets tough. Like when you've ever made a shady business deal. I'll never do that. And then temptation comes. I'll never break a marriage vow. And then you find yourself in that spot. I'll never disappoint my kids with my character. And you return to that spot. I'll never become an addict. And you find yourself caught up in a hurt or habit or hang up that you can't shake. Big talk when it's easy. Not so much when it gets difficult. I'll never lie to my parents to cover my tracks. I'll never turn my back on my friends. I'll never take a spiritual nosedive. I want you to catch this because Peter meant it. Because if you move forward from that upper room into the garden when Jesus is praying those prayers and he has Peter, James, and John to come along with him and praying, and it's been a long night and they're sleeping and he's like trying to get them to stay awake, and Jesus prays 3 times is what we talked about last week, and we left it where Jesus is looking up at them saying, stay awake with me. I pray that you won't fall into temptation. His eyes go up and he sees the row of torches coming out to get him, led by Judas. So what happens in that moment? All those people with those torches come to get Jesus, and Judas comes to him and Jesus says to him, hey friend, do what you've come to do. And Judas identifies him with a kiss on the cheek. And then it is game on. Everybody's moving in to capture Jesus. And I want you to know, Peter meant it, because he pulled out his little fishing knife that he's got. There's a whole battalion of people that are coming to arrest this teacher. And Peter's like taking swings with his fishing knife, like game on, let's go. I've been ready. I just told Jesus a couple hours ago that I was ready to die, and I'm ride or die in this moment. I'm ready. Takes out the knife. The first person next to him is a guy named Malchus, cuts his ear off, and Jesus is like, whoa, 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 whoa. He's like, Peter, that's not how we fight. That's not what this night is about. And this is what happens historically. Jesus picks up that ear, puts it back on Malchus's ear. Peter, that's not how we fight. Who's still arresting Jesus after he just pops the ear back on? I don't know, but good on you. That's amazing. That's amazing. Peter, that's not how we fight. And in that moment, because he was ready to die he was ready to die for Jesus. He meant it. But he didn't know how to fight the battle that Jesus was getting ready to walk into. So all the disciples and apostles in that moment, they are scattered that night. So he had big talk, like when life is easy, and he was ready to fight for Jesus, but he had no walk when things got difficult. Let me just walk. Matthew 26, we're kind of in that chapter. He says, those that arrested Jesus, verse 57, took him to Caiaphas, the high priest. So Jesus is getting ready to go through a number of trials in this night because the Jewish authorities didn't have the authority to kill Jesus. They had authority to do all their stuff in their local place, but they had to have Roman authority. So you're going to watch 11 trials happen, all unjust, in a matter of hours that are going to lead to Jesus' death. Unjust trials, but this is the first one. Those that arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. That's crazy. How did they get there? Oh, because Judas had sold them out and sold Jesus out, and they had figured out how to be there to go capture him and get this thing escalated quickly. But Peter followed him at a distance. Let me catch this for a second. Of all the people that are scattered, Peter's the only one that follows. We give him a hard time because he fails. He's the only one, even at a distance. And when I fail, that's where I find myself. Distancing myself from Jesus, even if I'm trying to follow him, distancing myself from Jesus and distancing myself from others. That's what I do. It goes on in verse, let me make sure I got it. Verse 69, it says this. Now Peter was sitting outside the courtyard and a servant girl came to him. You also are with Jesus of Galilee, she said. So it's late at night. I mean, we've already had the Last Supper. We've already had the Passover meal. We've already sung the hymn. We've already been praying in the garden. I mean, it's late into the AM, like Thursday night, Friday morning. And so Jesus is in this like religious leader's house. Caiaphas, this high priest. There's all the elders. It's a big going on out there. And so Peter comes into the courtyard and there's a fire going on out there. A charcoal fire is what it says. And there's these people that are just warming themselves by it, and everybody's kind of covered up. You know, there wasn't pandemic, but I'm sure there were masks on. So there's covered up out there and hanging out, and then they're talking, and as you would do, just kind of saying hey and acknowledging each other, and there's this servant girl that's like, I know, I mean, I've been following, everyone knows that Jesus is in town. You were with them. And it goes on to say this. But he denied before them all. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Then he went out to the gateway. He's like, I got to remove myself from this situation. People know who I am, because if they're arresting him and going to kill him, then I know that that's bad news for me. Where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, this fellow is with Jesus of Nazareth. He denied it again with an oath. I don't know the man. He's like, I swear to you, like on my mother's grave, like I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, no, I recognize you. Second time that he denies Jesus, and it goes on. After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, surely, I mean, you were one of them that were following. Your accent gives you away. You know, like if Southern boy ever goes to like Boston, like they know you're not from around here, right? And if somebody ever says Ventura, like a churro, you're like, oh, where are you from? You're not. So you know the way that he was even talking, they knew. Like you're a Galilean. Like there's a way that you kind of have slang, and there's a way that you speak. You're not from around. They're not mad at him, and he's not in trouble. It's just that he's just denying it. They knew. Like you're one of them. You're one of the followers of Jesus. And it goes on to say, and he began to call down curses. I mean, this is professional fisherman. This is game on. This is Grizzly Adams losing his cool a little bit, and he just like makes a sailor proud in this moment of how he's describing what he's going to do to them and what he thinks about Jesus. And he swore to them, I don't know the man. And immediately a rooster crows. And what Luke would tell us from his biography is that Caiaphas' place is up here and Peter's down in this courtyard in the gateway here. And somehow there's this eye contact that's made when the rooster crows. And Peter, it says, remember the word that Jesus has spoken, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he bails. And he went out and wept bitterly. The once proud, indestructible rock Peter is broken by a couple of servant girls asking simple questions on if he knew Jesus. And he doesn't know what to do. You've been there when all of a sudden you realize, like, I have destroyed my relationships and I don't know what to do. I have gambled my savings and I don't know what to do. I have an addiction that has wreaked carnage and I don't know what to do. My kids have just watched me mess it up over and over again, and I don't know what to do. My friendships are in ruins. God, my relationship with God is so distant, and I didn't realize was in this spot, and I don't know what to do, so he bolts. And he's failed, and everyone knows it. So I'm going to fast forward. Jesus goes through trials. Peter runs and gets away. Jesus is crucified. The disciples are scattered, and there's an empty tomb. That's all good news in the next couple weeks. That's what we're going to celebrate in Easter. But we're fast forwarding over here because at the other side of the empty tomb, it's good news for those of us that have failed. Peter has seen on this, fast forward to get on the other side of Easter with me. I know it's a big jump, but Peter has seen the empty tomb. He just hasn't seen Jesus yet. And I don't know, maybe that's your story of failure. You're like, you know that there's an empty tomb, but you don't know that Jesus would have anything to do with you. So we watched Peter have big talk when it was easy and ready to fight for Jesus, but no walk when life got difficult. And then we're getting ready to watch Peter be humbled by forgiveness when Jesus shows back up. It's in John 21, I'm going to fly through this a little bit. There's so many good lessons in here for us. But afterward, Jesus appeared to his disciples. This is on the other side of Easter Sunday. This is good news. This is the first time that Jesus and Peter see each other post-empty tomb. To his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and two other disciples were together. And Peter, I'm going to fish. Simon Peter told them, I love this because he's like, I don't know what else to do. I have messed up royally. I was a fisherman before Jesus. That's what I know. I'm going to go back to I'm going to go fish. And I love this crew around him, and they said, we'll go with you. You got friends like that when you're at your lowest? No, you're not alone tonight. Where you go, I'll go. I'm with you. And most of the time, fishermen, let's be honest, it ain't about the fishing or the catching. It's about getting away with the people to think and talk and what God may want to do with you. So he's just going back to what he knew. So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. It's great fishermen. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. But he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? Great question to ask your fishermen friends. No, they answered. Then the best other thing to do is just give them advice of how to do it better. So he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, it's the Lord, because this is exactly a throwback to how he called them in the first place. Keeps going. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say it's the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him. He's like basically in his skivvies, throws on the robe, jumps into the water. I don't know why he's going to need the robe in the water, but apparently he needed the robe in the water. The other disciples followed him in the boat. Matthew's like, he bailed. We had to get all the fish in and row all the way back. It would have been easier if he'd just stayed in the boat with us, but he's swimming and I don't know what he was doing. Towing the net full of fish, just reminding you that we had to do all this, Peter, thank you. For they were not far from the shore, that's even funnier, about 100 yards. It's like you could have just stayed with or whatever, Peter, it's fine. When they landed, they saw a fire of charcoal fire. Is the only other time in the New Testament that's used, when Peter denies Jesus, and then in this moment when Peter's getting ready to restore Jesus, with fish on it and some bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you've just caught. Let's eat. So Simon Peter climbed into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even so, with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and let's have breakfast. Can you imagine that scene? What's going through Peter's mind and heart? You've been there when you've got to have a meeting with somebody that you got to own some stuff with, and you have messed it up royally, but you want to keep in relationship and restore the relationship, and you sit down at the meeting and they just look at each other, and you have a meal, and the whole time you just got stuff that you want to say and things that you need to get out, and you want to make amends so bad, and there's stuff that you want to. It's just been there and that, but it's with Jesus, locked eye to eye. His friend that he denied and saw killed, and now there's an empty tomb, and we know that there's more going on in this interaction. And then Jesus says to him this, and later in the verse 15, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Do you love me? And Peter answered, yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, well, feed my lambs. I got stuff for you to do. You love me? Really? I got stuff for you to do. Second time. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Third time, I know Peter denied Jesus 3 times, so let's just assume that Jesus for all time is making sure that Peter understands that all that stuff is forgiven in this moment. Third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you, Jesus said. Feed my sheep. I got stuff for you in this moment. Man, I just want to pull out a few lessons for us in this failure season of Peter that we will experience. The first one is this. What we can learn is that my performance is not the basis of God's acceptance of me. The fact that I am a much-loved son or daughter gives me the hope and the freedom to live out the calling that he's given me. I don't earn my way to being a much-loved son or daughter because I'm doing great today. I can live free because God has already accepted me, and it's not based on my performance. God specializes in messy human people. because that's all he's got to work with. Save Jesus. So my performance is not the basis of God's acceptance. Second thing that's helpful for me is that my failure is not final. It doesn't define me. Failure, it's like what Jesus does. He doesn't make bad people good and cleaned up a little bit. He makes dead people in their failure alive in him and restored. And that is good news for us. Cancel culture doesn't fit with Jesus's invitation to failures. It just doesn't fit. Because that's not our final story. The worst day, the enemy of our soul wants to make our worst day our profile pic for everyone to see. But Jesus wants to make our life a video of a story of redemption from beginning to end. That's our call. Third thing that I can learn from Peter's failure is I need to own my failure. I got to own it. I was wrong. I did it. I'm sorry. Forgive me are powerful words spoken out of being a broken place and not just a miserable one because you got caught. I got to own it. In fact, Proverbs 28:13 says, a man who refuses to admit his mistakes can never be successful, but if he confesses and forsakes them, he gets another chance. What I can learn from Peter's failure is that I need to stay in the group. Isolation is such the temptation when I mess up and fail, whether it be publicly or privately. We are always tempted to pull away from our church, from our groups, from our family, from our relationships. We think, I can't show my face after my failure. Stay in the group. I'm so embarrassed. Stay in the group. Like the enemy will try to isolate you because if he can isolate you, he can pick you off and take you out. That's exactly the way he fights, and it's dirty. Keep showing up. Go back to the meetings. Like if we're those kind of friends, don't let people walk through this alone. Reach out to someone. Fifth lesson that I can learn from Peter's failure and restoration is that I have to find Jesus. If you think back to your latest huge failure, I promise you, Jesus is in the midst of it somewhere. I've got to figure out where he was in the midst of it, and I got to find Jesus and get to him. Peter had to jump in and swim to him as fast as he could because that's the place where healing is. So no matter what kind of failure you've been through, you got to go find Jesus as fast as you can because that's the only place you get restored. Last one. Our mess usually turns into our message if we'll be open-handed with it. See, for Peter, it wasn't just his confession about how he messed up. Our testimony is not just our testimony of what we've been through. It's just our confession until we let God transform it, all right? So it doesn't become something that's powerful. It's just a confession when we say we messed up. But when we get transformed by it, it becomes our testimony and our story. It becomes the video of our life of how faithful God has been at our worst day to help other people. So I would just say for us today, I don't know where you've been and what you've been through. Where do you find yourself in the failure story as a broom full of failures? Big talk when it's easy? No walk when it gets difficult? Or are you in that place where God is restoring you back to him because he's got stuff for you to do? There are only three options. And wherever you are today, wherever he finds you, it's a good day to be restored. Why don't you pray with me? God, thank you for your kingdom. Thank you for your word. Thank you for Peter that didn't let the shame of his failure define his life, but he let the power of your restoration and the power of your son and the power of your forgiveness define him as a much-loved follower of yours. God, we need that in every season, but for sure in this season. And it's in his powerful name that we pray.